Hi, this is Dr. Don Bonner with Personalized Wellness. Today I want to shoot the beginning of a two-part video series that I want to do on belly fat. And I think it's very important for my patients when they come into the clinic to understand that this visceral fat, belly fat, is really the root cause of a lot of problems that they have. And it's it's one of the signs of metabolic syndrome, and I really address this issue with all of my patients. As a matter of fact, I weigh all my patients when they come into the clinic, but one of the biggest things that I do is I take a tape measure and I measure around their waist at the belly button, and I get a ratio called the waist to height ratio. It's a very important thing that you can do at home on your own. Just take and measure your waist and divide it by your height in inches, and you want that ratio to be at 0.5 or below. And I can tell you, I haven't had any patients yet be at 0.5, including myself. So I think I'm at 0.52 or something like that. So it's a very important measurement, and it lets you know if you have any belly fat and the consequences of that. So this first lecture that I want to do today, I want to talk about how belly fat develops and why is it so dangerous? Why are we worried about it, or why am I worried about it? Well, we just went over the waist to height ratio. So visceral fat, what we know about visceral fat is that it's much different than our subcutaneous fat that you have, when you pinch your skin or pinch your love handles, that's subcutaneous fat. And we know that it is not dangerous, but the fat around and in your organs is very dangerous. It increases insulin resistance. It increases inflammation, which we know is basically a root cause of most chronic ailments. You actually have organ damage to include elevated liver enzymes. You can actually have liver failure from fatty liver disease. And then finally, you can also get beta cell dysfunction at your pancreas from your pancreas being loaded with fat. And that becomes kind of the end game when you're finally diagnosed as a diabetic, because you're not able to excrete enough insulin now to control the glucose that you had in the past. Initially, as you become insulin resistant, your pancreas is able to secrete more and more insulin to try to maintain glucose levels. But eventually, when you get this beta cell dysfunction, your pancreas can't excrete enough insulin anymore, and then your glucoses begin to rise sharply. So that's the start of being diagnosed with diabetes. But way before that ever happens, I just want to kind of go over the time course real quick in this video of what happens to cause these issues. First and foremost, the two things that really bring this on much more quickly are sugars, which is a disaccharide. Sugar is made up of 50% glucose and 50% fructose. And processed foods. Processed foods are loaded with high fructose corn syrup, which is 55% fructose. The problem with that is that as you ingest those substances, they get into your body, they have to be metabolized. The glucose can be metabolized nearly everywhere in the body. Cells will take up glucose and be used as an energy source. However, fructose has to go to the liver and be metabolized in the liver. That's the only place it can be metabolized. So when that fructose goes to the liver, and when you have an excess of glucose that your body needs, that glucose will also go to the liver. When it goes to the liver then actually turns it into one of two things. The glucose can be turned into glycogen, which is a storage form of glucose. But once that's maxed out in the liver, then the liver takes that glucose and the fructose that it's metabolizing and it turns it into fat, which is called de novo lipogenesis, the making of fat. After the liver makes that fat, then it sends it out into the periphery in VLDL particles, and that's triglycerides. That's what you'll measure in your blood, is triglycerides. Those triglycerides will go to the fat cells. The fat cells will then, through a process called hormone sensitive lipase, take up that the fat. The fat goes, into the fat cells and stored. Problem is, at some point, the fat cells themselves become bigger and bigger and bigger. So they reach a limit to how much fat they can actually store. And that in itself becomes inflammatory. And there's hormones that are released from fat. We could do a whole lecture on the fat cells. But once those fat cells become hypertrophied, it becomes harder and harder to get that fat into those fat cells. Your insulin goes higher and higher and higher, trying to push this fat into the fat cells. And then it also, what can't be released from the liver now, because there's kind of a backup in the system, the liver has to store that fat in the liver, which it does not want to do. So the liver becomes more and more engorged with fat. As it becomes more and more engorged with fat, that's where insulin resistance really takes off. And as insulin resistance takes off, it takes more and more insulin to kind of shove these products into this overstuffed balloon of the liver. At that point, once your fat cells are hypertrophied, your liver has got fat in it and it's big and bloated like a balloon, then what happens, we start shipping this fat into other organs. So your muscles will start to take up fat, your pancreas will start to take up fat, the omentum in your body gets bigger and bigger with fat, and as these organs become more and more fat laden, that's it when you begin to notice your belly fat getting bigger and bigger. That's one reason you'll notice that people can be diabetic and be relatively thin, but they'll have a bit of a pooch or a little pot belly, beer belly, if you will. That's what's super dangerous, because when you see that belly fat, you can almost guarantee that person's insulin resistant and on their way to diabetes. Okay, so we've talked about how this develops and the dangers in it, and why we don't want to have this belly fat. On the next video, what I'm going to talk about is what we can do to get rid of this belly fat. And here at Personalized Wellness, for the most part, what I do is a low carbohydrate diet and fasting protocols. But we'll get into that, and we'll get into some of the nuances of those two different type of modalities. And I hope you enjoyed this, and if you'd like more of these sorts of videos, check out my YouTube channel at Dr. Bonner and Dr. Don Bonner, rather. You can check out Personalized Wellness on my business Facebook page. I've got a lot of videos there also. But the main thing I want to do is educate you, educate my patients, and I hope this helps. Thank you.